Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Smith Falls Police Service Board for Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. I'll call the meeting to order at 8:09 a.m. and open with the land acknowledgement. On October 21st, 2025, acknowledge the sacred land which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and has rich indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and ancestral territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We're mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, and being mindful of generations to come. I've only got a couple comments myself, just to update the board. Since the last meeting, I met with regional board chairs from other services within Eastern Ontario, just we've tried to do it for a while. We finally got a chance to connect, talk about our common challenges. I think there's wide acknowledgement that we're all struggling with some of the requirements of the new act, and try to make sure we get up to speed with policies and procedures, the administrative support challenges, and trying to handle the volume of work. Board member fatigue. It came up that the volume of work is excessive, and puts a lot of onus on the board. One board in particular, and doing their policies and procedures, they simply divvied up a section to each board member to review, and it was like she said 8 or 9 hours of work for each of them just to do that one section. So there's a lot for us to absorb, but and I guess there's longer term concerns about even just sustainability. So a lot of common themes that emerge from that, and we plan to continue to meet periodically.
Who was it?
Gananoque and Deep River. Sorry, Brockville and Deep River.
Oh, and Gananoque didn't?
Gananoque wasn't able to participate.
Oh, okay.
It will probably in the future.
Have you been to Deep River? It's lovely this time of year.
Yes. Just that's my only remarks. Chief, any remarks from you?
No remarks, no.
Okay. Any additions to the agenda?
I do, yes. I have, I want to speak about dispatcher staffing in new business.
Okay, new business. I'll make that D. Anything else?
An in-camera item to add as well.
Okay, we'll make that H in camera. And the topic?
And portable radio purchases to do with capital of 2025, which I have a capital presentation I'm going to show.
Yes.
So that could, if that could go in with the 2025 budget monitor, or sorry, I could put that in E, new business.
Well, that E, new business instead of in camera?
No, it's not in camera.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
So the in camera is?
In camera, there's one item in camera. And then the radio purchase, I'm going to do an overview to the board of where we're at capital-wise.
I'm assuming it's an identifiable individual for in-camera.
Yeah, so we just look at the topic for the addition of the in-camera item. Will it be identifiable individual or?
Yes, it is. The in-camera item is.
Okay. Okay. Look for motion for approval of the agenda as amended. Moved by Andrew, second by Chris.
What was the radio? What was the last one? Radio?
The purchase of radios in the capital budget this year.
Okay, ask for any declaration of pecuniary or conflict of interest. Seeing none. Need a motion. We have a number of in-camera items, now totaling 8. Ask for motion to move in camera. The Smith Falls Police Service Board moving camera to discuss items pertaining to intimate, financial, or personal matters, or other matters may be disclosed of such a nature having regard to the circumstances of desirability of avoiding their disclosure in the interest of any person affected or in the public interest, outweighs the desirability of adhering to the principle that proceedings be open to the public in accordance with Section 44 of the Community Safety Policing Act. Motion moving camera by Chris, second by Rob. All in favor? We'll be probably an hour, I suspect. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. We've returned from a number of in-camera items. While in camera, we did add an additional in-camera item I, which spoke to identifiable individual as well. Moving on in our agenda, we have no correspondence. Look for consideration of minutes from the previous meeting, September 23rd. I'll have a chance to review the minutes. Looking for a motion for approval. Moved by Andrew, seconded by Chris. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Business arising in previous meeting. Board policy procedures. So as directed by the board at our last meeting, I did engage with Dave Preston, who is a consultant. A number of police services are using, boards are using for the preparation of policies and procedures. And I think Stephanie couriered our current and what we have drafted for policies and procedures, sent it to him via a USB stick. He has that, and he'll be doing a draft version of policy procedures for the board, which we'll then have to review in depth and detail to ensure that we're prepared to move ahead and approve those at some point in time, hopefully before the end of the year, the next couple of months. But so anyway, so just an update that's underway, and I suspect we should have that back within a few weeks to delve deeply into ourselves. Any questions? So moving on, Chief, the 2025 budget monitor.
So we're still riding high on the travel and staff training. That has everything to do with the new act, as well as some work that our detective is doing in regards to our missing person file as well. So there's a lot of overtime in those two areas, and we have been riding high there in the last few months. However, I think I've mentioned before, the victim support grant, there was money that I had allocated for training, so that will go back into our budget line and hopeful to be approved for the next round of grant for the victim support one. So that'll assist. I just wanted to point out as well, our salary recovery, we have almost $200,000 back into our line for salaries and recovery through WSIB, as well as our overtime. Although it's above budget, which I knew that was going to be because we only budgeted $70,000 this year, we're still quite low in comparison to last year for our overtime. I think, last year we were at 157,000, and this year we're at 103. So we've dropped significantly, but again, put more money in our salary line. And I also wanted to point out too, in our budget line under grants, you'll see that police protocol grant. So that was a one-time grant that I found to support salary for our civilian staff, particularly, that came from MAG, from the Crown Attorney's office in Ontario, when they came up with that disclosure protocol, that all of a sudden it was these tight timelines that police services across the province were having to abide by, and that's data downloading of in-car cameras and cell blocks and everything else, which took a lot of workload for our civilian staff to do and get that up and running. So I was able to get $76,393.96 back into our salary line. So that is all of the highlight portion of the budget, as well as the port security grant. That money goes right back into our budget line as well for salaries. And you'll see the $13,473 in there as well. Just
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, questions or comments?
Just with respect to salaries, when you're saying the additional overtime this year is 70,000 versus 157 last year.
No, 70,000 is what we budgeted for.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of staff, how many frontline staff are there that are extra as opposed to last year? When did those extra frontline staff come
So
on?
we have altogether now for 2024, we are at 7, I believe, extra staffing.
Okay.
But the overtime for that as well is our civilian support, of which we have not increased those numbers.
So there's 7 more staff frontline, 2025 versus 2024.
Yes. Okay. I'm trying to think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Any further?
No.
No? Okay. Anyone else?
We're the overtime is obviously 50% over budget, but you got to note that the salaries is actually to the tune of $360,000 low right now. So that's very good. So
Yeah.
it looks bad on a very small section of the overtime, but
Yeah.
when you look at it's looking really good. So.
Yeah, and what we had discussed at the beginning of the year with the board was dropping our budget line, just obviously with the increase that we saw in policing. You're going to drop your overtime budget-wise, but you know that there's going to be problems. We can't predict overtime sometimes if you have a major case, if you have a lot going on, or someone gets sick and all of a sudden you're running into the overtime. So we do keep a tight lid on the overtime, but still it's by shuffling some people around, that's for sure. But certainly at the beginning of the year, we still, you have coach officers or people training and they're not on the road yet by themselves. You
Yeah,
can't
so I
lose
guess
those staff.
you would expect the overtime results, second half of the year would be less than the first half. because you've got
We're really
more.
hopeful even in 2025. Like we'll still keep the budget low. We just know that it's going to go up. But if we kept it at 70,000, we're hopeful to see less, we hope. But again, I keep the board posted as to what we've got. But once you get officers that are trained and can work on their own, you won't have as many. And hopefully, knock on wood, that everybody stays healthy too.
Yes.
And we
Okay.
don't have anything major.
So Chief 2026 budget and capital.
Actually, what do I have? 2026. So I'm still working on the 2026 budget with the town. As you know, the town works with us for the salaries. So Steph did a great Excel sheet to assist the town actually by putting every single member together when they look at their salary increases. So for constables, for example, they go up levels for 4th class, 3rd class, 2nd, and 1st, depending. So there's people in the middle of the year that might go up a level. There's some that are facing, there's a member that's probably going to retire. And they also budget-wise, we look at those that are on WSIB. So you might not have to budget that kind of salary. And what are we looking at in 2026? So we'll be able to have a better picture. And like we did last year, board chair, like if you want to come in, we'll go over the budget, look at everything prior to, and then present it to the board. It's a better way of doing it, so you can see line by line what we're looking at. Certainly not what we looked at last year. We'll be in a better position, and there might be some capital projects that I'll have to defer depending. But yeah, so we're just waiting. As you know, the salary part, the benefits, all that is the big chunk of our operating and administrative budget. Everything else, I'm looking at increasing, obviously, our budget line, for example, staff training and travel. Those are the ones that we get high this year. However, phone, for example, phone lines, computer, going to Rogers, that significantly has dropped our IT line significantly. So I looked at last year, like I budgeted, for example, where was it here? For example, like any kind of the computer services and that, last year, like phone services, computer services was $30,000 budgeting. I knocked $20,000 off of that. So things like everything else is going to balance less somewhere, more in those two areas, but not major increases that I anticipate.
Board, actually next, we'll have a draft budget next meeting, I assume.
Next meeting, yeah. So I'm hopeful the town was working on it. We gave everything we had last week, I believe, and I know that this is busy time for everybody, so I should hopefully have, if not this week, next week. But yes, it will be presented to the board hopefully
Good shape.
by the next meeting.
Yes.
So we should meet beforehand if you'd like, or
Yeah, we're
Yep.
planning to do so. Okay. Any questions or comments on the, no?
so I have that PowerPoint.
Moving forward, new business. Chief, good news, grant update?
Zero.
Oh, I think I had I just wanted to go over the capital budget though, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, so, okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give an overview where we're at capital wise, so you had an understanding.
Where we should be.
Is it just under board meeting, Joey?
Hmm?
Is it just under board meeting October 25?
Yeah, it says capital budget. Yeah. So the first thing that we had was the annual vehicle replacement. Remember initially, I wasn't sure if we were going to defer a vehicle, but we had no choice with our vehicles. Some of them were in. So I had budgeted 70,000, but we weren't sure how we were going to proceed with that. So it went over budget, but I'll show you how it all works out. So we fully equipped the Tahoe. It was $80,759.89. We then took the Durango. It was a 2016 Durango. Was previously used by administrative staff. We put that into circulation to have as the new crime vehicle. The Durango didn't require any modifications to put that in the fleet. We then took the 2023 Charger from CIB and made it to our traffic frontline car. That required about $7,636.60 to modify for a frontline vehicle. And then we decommissioned the Ford Taurus. However, I just was successful with a grant, so we received $7,000 in funding towards a vehicle. So it's going to go back into 105 to keep it for this year instead of renting vehicles. Renting vehicles lately has been a difficult thing to do because you need to. It's a pain when you have to rent vehicles for officers. So we're just going to use this vehicle as part of our grant funding.
So if they're going for training or,
Yeah, training, anything.
What year is 105? Sorry, I just out of curiosity, does
I
anybody?
think it's a 2008, 17, 18.
Oh, 8-9 years is probably
Yeah,
more than life expectancy.
They're ridden tough in a small town. But it's going to save us some money, certainly for travel, training, mileage, paying for that. I know the town's having issues too with rentals. Whether they're filthy, whether you can't get them when you order them. It's just been a bit odd with rental vehicles. And then if you're renting it for an officer, you have to be the driver. So they would have to be the one renting the vehicle. And it's a bit of so we thought this is just as easy. Just retrofit, get this car back on the road and put that money that we got for funding for the vehicle into this vehicle for 2026 and just hang on to it another year. So in total, we were 22,675.26 over that capital budget line, but I'll show you how it all works out. So our NG911 capital was 25,000. That's saved when NG911 is implemented in 2027 and beyond. That's what they've done every year for the service, so that still sits. CAD mapping, so CAD mapping biometrics was budgeted for capital. So there was 2 of those biometrics that were approved by the board to put in cells for safety of our detainees. So we're still waiting though on the final install. So we've only paid to have it installed, but not the monitoring part because they haven't fully between our IT and to get it installed. But it's pretty straightforward. And then the CAD mapping, I'm deferring to 2026. So we have 54,136 and 61 remaining in that capital line.
Do you expect part of that to be used before the end of the year?
Well, that's where I'm gonna get to the radios.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, so our
Compare yourself.
ALPRs, we budgeted 64.5, we spent 47,183, we have the 17 remaining. However, the grant funding that I just got approved is gonna pay for all of that. So that's still there. In use, so we have the ballistic helmets, that was part of the capital. I budgeted 20,000, they cost 12,226.96 because they're sharing amongst officers. And then they deploy them on their shift, and it's for active attacker situations only. It's not to be used, regular traffic stops are not wearing the ballistic helmets. It's just if they have a situation where there's an active shooter. So we have remaining 7,773.04 in that line. So altogether we have, I just wanted to give you an overview on the expenditures. So we still have almost 95,000 sitting in our capital lines altogether. So even with that being over budget, 22,000 with the vehicle, we had money saved through every other capital expense. So we have $94,782.81 still remaining, not including the 244,500 that's been in reserves that keeps lumping over.
Sorry, just with respect to the CAD biometrics, I thought there was 47,000 left on that one, not on the ALPR. I thought we were getting money.
That was what was spent. Yeah, that was what.
That's what's being
Oh,
spent so
yeah,
far.
you're right. That was what was spent. So it should be, that's what was spent, the CAD biometrics.
So it shouldn't be capital purchases remaining, it should be capital purchase spent so far, expended.
Yeah, that what I totaled was what's remaining to be spent.
But if you go back 2 slides, there's like 47,000 left on the, okay, sorry, yeah.
That's the ALPRs?
Yeah, now I see it.
Or 17,000 remaining.
Do you want me to go to the next one? Sorry.
Yeah, so that,
Question answer or you're?
No, so.
Here, I'll go through the slide. Yeah, easy for you to see.
So the ALPR was covered by a grant.
yeah, everything's
There,
covered,
entire-
yeah, yeah. So there's nothing,
So it's all returned to,
I'll return to capital.
Okay, but capital purchase remaining, shouldn't there still be 54,000 on the CAD biometrics?
Yeah, 54,136.61. Yeah.
Saying it remains here.
Pulled up wrong again, maybe.
So it should say 40,
Yeah.
should say 54,000 there.
Yeah, it should say 54 there.
So it's way more than that then? It's another 44,000, it's 138,000 then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, you proofread this one. Yeah. So there's 138.
So we're better than we thought. That's
We're
good.
better than we thought, yeah.
Good catch, Andrew.
Well, no, but then the ALPR is we only,
It's fully funded.
but we only have 17,000 left in use, showing that we have 47.
But you got a grant to pay for it also.
Okay.
I got it here. We can look. So the ask is the radios then, is that what?
Yeah, so we are low on portable radios. The price that I have for 6 plus the charger is 18,000 and change. And I just wanted to request the board to be able to do an out of capital expense, but we have lots of money remaining in our capital line.
Do we need a motion for that?
so these are the ones that officer carries on them?
Yes, so I've had to give up my portable radio, so the chief, the deputy has his on.
Yeah.
But I've put mine on the front line because we're short of radios. Just with the extra staffing, it was something that we didn't budget for, just because we've had a couple people that had left the police service and we hired more. So during the year, so that was one thing that we didn't think of, like I didn't think of that we'd need the portable radios, but now when we have extra staff, we don't have enough radios at the time because we get some that are put into, that need repairing and replacing.
So how many do we have? This is replacing all of them, or this is adding?
No, it's just
half?
adding the adding 6 radios. Yeah, that
They would be fairly essential then?
they're very essential. Yeah.
Okay,
Do I need a motion?
yeah, I agree.
I would give a motion that the board approves the $18,000 for the purchase of 6 new radios.
Okay, second by Andrew. Any further questions? All in favor? Okay,
Question, do I go to council with that request for the portable radios or?
no, because the council will just approve the overall budget, not line by line.
Yeah.
So
Just because it's a capital expense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of money there regardless. Thank you. Grant update. Sorry, Steph,
Do you
it's in
know
there
there's
somewhere.
There's more slides. Do you need it?
Pardon?
There's the.
Oh, yeah, I haven't got to that yet though.
Okay.
I'll have to go back to it.
So you want to go back? Ready this?
Grant update. So I was successful with the Community Safety and Policing Provincial and Local Grant. The press release I just saw, it's gone out online for you to access of the police services across Ontario that were successful with this grant. Can you go to the next slide? It's a provincially, there's two points to this grant, local and provincial. The provincially funded grant supports policing needs and priority risks that they're seeing in their communities in Ontario. So we focused our grant on strengthening our community outreach and engagement, taking aim on crime for a safer Smith Falls community. Focus for us was on sexual violence and harassment as well as retail theft. There's some key focus objectives that the grants have, for example, guns and gangs, etc. So you pick a focus that you have in your community and you write to that focus. So there, like I said, there's 2 streams. So the local one is what the government allocates to the service, and they allocated $60,893.02. That goes straight into salary recovery. And then we were very successful with our provincial priority. We asked for $299,353.48, and we got it. So this is going to support salaries for 2 officers. We've upped our crime unit by 1 officer to focus on these priorities. So $252,853.48 are going back into the salary recovery line for 2 officers. $15,000 will go back into our overtime budget. As you know, we were over budget there. It'll go back into that support. $77,000 to support a vehicle use, which will be $105,000. $10,000 to support the victim advocate who attends our office once a week, reviews all the IPV related files. We have her coming to the station, working collaboratively with Lanark County Interval House for the sexual violence harassment outreach piece. I think it's very important after the homicide, when we saw how much criminal harassment was used in this case, and to have that awareness to the public is really important to me, for our public to understand how critical criminal harassment is in cases of domestic violence and what to watch out for, and signs as well. $5,000 is being allocated to support the local DBIA and Chamber of Commerce and retail theft prevention and workshops to work collaboratively with our service. Excuse me, I just had a meeting earlier this week with the DBIA Chamber of Commerce in the morning to go over what they're looking for and what they're seeing, because what I'm hearing if I go into local shops is that I don't want to call, I didn't think to call the police, or I don't want to bother the police if someone's stealing from their store. But the difference is when you're stealing from a small business, it really affects their bottom line versus a Walmart or a LCBO, where we're seeing a massive increase in thefts. It's going to, we wanted to help our small businesses and in theft prevention and what can we do to help fund our local businesses. So that money is going to support them. And then $8,000 to administer the project with our community partners. So that goes back into our budget line. And then money goes to a grant writer that I have that helps me put everything together to put it forward.
Well, that's
Any
very
questions?
encouraging. Some questions?
Yes.
Thanks, great news. I'm wondering how much of the 300,000 is new spending and how much covers existing budgeted spending?
So good question, because I talked to the town about that. So this grant goes from April 2020, April this year. So we just got approval now. We're in October, but it goes back to April. So I'll be able to allocate this year and then some of it in 2026, because the town, how they put it in our lines is a bit different than our grant allocation. So I provide the town with all the information as far as our applications, our agreement, what goes where. And so my understanding is it's going to go into 2025, and there might be a small portion that'll go in from January to March 2026. Yeah, so good news for sure.
Any further comments or questions? No?
Good job.
Yeah, keep them coming.
Yeah.
Okay. New business B, agreement with PPS.
So this came up during discussions, obviously, with NG 911. The previous chief had originally had a backup system at the fire service. However, that was moved without my knowledge into a small room in the town hall, and it's definitely not feasible for a proper emergency backup system. So I have reached out and signed an agreement with Brockville Police, Chief Noonan and I. So if, for example, say there's a major power outage here in St. Charles, that we have backup support for NG 911 for any of the emergency calls. So we would send a staff member to Brockville. We're on the same niche system, and the calls would then be transferred to Brockville Police. In the meantime, we'd have staff that would head down there and support it with, this is, like I said, it's a backup, it's a proper backup emergency plan to comply with the new NG 911 that's coming in 2027. Anyways, you need an adequate backup plan. And since obviously with whatever happened with the fire service, that wasn't going to be adequate. So I reached out to a police service, and it makes more sense. We're in the same, line as what we need, what to do, and how to get the calls. It's an easy transfer over to Brockville Police, and they also work with Owen Sound for that NG 911 support too. So it was a very seamless agreement. So it's just an MOU, and I can send a copy to the board that the chief and I just signed. And then we have a proper emergency plan, backup plan in place for our police service.
Is that reciprocal? Are we providing backup for them as well, or just?
No, so I think they're going to go with Kingston Police only because of where they are. They're going to do that. So,
And is there a cost?
no cost.
Okay.
Nope, no cost. Because I'm going to provide resources as well. And this is only, in extenuating circumstances where, if you have a complete power failure, something happens major here that we need a place to go. So it made sense to use Brockville. They're not far. And
We have a generator at the detachment.
Yep. Yeah.
But it could be the phone lines themselves are compromised.
You just never know. And part of your NG 911 agreement is you have to have an emergency backup plan. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Cruiser,
To go
chief.
back to the, I know we were in talks earlier about the cruiser. So there was a cruiser available in Sudbury, a hybrid model. However, when I really started digging into it, I got the pricing from PCPG for a brand new 2026 hybrid Ford all-wheel drive, and the pricing was the same. So I thought, I'm not dealing with Sudbury having to worry about traveling and everything else. So I sent you all the specs of it. It's through your email, but I think that this will be a good choice for us. Is I've already reached out to Ford here locally, because then you're dealing with a local Ford to have a hybrid model, and the pricing being the same. So I was just asking the board for permission on pre-budget approval to at least get going on ordering a 2026 Explorer. The fear, not the fear always is, but by the time you end up going through the process, the last vehicle that we got, it takes months to get here, to get it retrofitted. We're almost near the end of the year before we get a vehicle. But at least to have that, you don't usually pay for it anyways until you get the vehicle. That's been the practice before, but at least to have approval to order it and get that rolling for 2026.
Questions, comment, Chris?
I think it's a great idea. I'm really excited to see what kind of data comes out of having the hybrid in the fleet for fuel costs. I know the vehicles are really visible in the community, and every time we're buying new vehicles, I get a lot of questions, and I'm already getting questions about the Tahoe. And I'm wondering if we could get some specifications of kind of cost, mileage, basic stuff of, say, a Tahoe, a normal Ford, a hybrid Ford, a car. Because when people are asking, oh, like, would it have been cheaper to buy a car over an SUV? I have no idea if it would have been or it wouldn't have been, or the cost benefits, and to be able to explain that, I think would be really useful, to shut down some of that scrutiny.
Yeah, absolutely. The equipment that we've got in our vehicles now, and happy to show you anytime you want, it's substantial. So it takes up, basically a hockey bag's worth of equipment that we put in our cruisers. So life-saving equipment, the defibrillator, first aid kits, all like the shields, rams, everything that we need under the new act has to go into a vehicle. So we find, like, for example, the Ford Taurus is way too small. And those are the vehicles, there's only so many vehicles that are police rated vehicles. So to answer that, we can only have so many cars. The SUVs are the more practical ones for our service because of everything that goes into the vehicles, and that's why they're pretty standard across the province. The Tahoes, the GMCs. The cars are usually used for crime cars, people that don't do the front line, because then you've got the carbine mounts, you've got everything. We used to be able to ride two in a car. You can't do that now because you have the computer here, you have all their equipment, their bags sit on the passenger seat, and then the trunk is full of stuff. So that's why we go for the SUVs, because of everything we need under the act. So each cruiser, we put the battering ram in, the Halligan tools, everything that if you had an active attacker, if you needed to get into a school, or every cruiser has this, and it's just all requirements. Defibs aren't requirements, but we want them because we've used them on people, and it was important to us to have them as well. So that's why we go with the bigger vehicles.
Yeah, and I think going hybrid, I think makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah,
For a small
yeah.
municipality. I don't know what the range is on the Explorer. So it's probably around 100 kilometers. So
It'd be interesting to see. Like the specs are all here, and obviously we haven't tried a hybrid, but I'm looking forward to seeing the difference too, and seeing. Another thing too, I was thinking, is the room in these vehicles. Like, if you have to put someone in the back of a Taurus, it's really difficult. They're very crammed, and if you have an officer that's, well, most of them are taller than I am, it's hard to fit into these Tauruses. Like, with all of our equipment, vests and everything else, the SUVs seem to be the more comfortable for everybody. The detainees too, there's more room in the back seat for them. So, but yeah, I'm happy to get that information, but that's, we only have so many vehicles that are police rated, and But yeah, look forward to doing the hybrid, trying that out, so.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
It's likely a trend once we start down the road.
It'd be
Chris?
interesting to see what our active vehicles are, what kind of mileage we put on them though. I'm more interested in that than, okay, what do we get? Like, what does this amount to in actual savings?
Yeah.
And
We can, we have that captured, so
Oh, I'm sure we do.
we can share with you how much mileage each vehicle puts on, the wear and tear.
yeah, like 105 or whatever
yeah.
number you said, what's on it for mileage over X number of years?
For sure. And then we'll be able to compare with the hybrid to see
100%.
if there's a savings. I know like some chiefs will say, no, in a smaller town, but then again, you're not using as much fuel. So maybe there will be, and maybe we'll be able to see that difference. So
Well, ours is all in-town driving, so that's, which is probably harder on a vehicle than
Yeah.
an OPP
oh,
vehicle, for
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
So I guess if you don't mind bringing a report back on the vehicles at a future meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The rate, what we have, the fleet we have, the kilometers they travel each year, or what they travel maybe on a shift. I think we'll look at we're transitioning away from tour through chargers into SUVs, and look at the merits obviously of hybrid. Two factors obviously, the benefits of a savings on fuel. At the same time, this afternoon, the Climate Protection Working Group will likely be passing their climate action plan and set of milestone targets, which will go across the corporation. And so we're driving the hybrid, we're reducing emissions as well. So contributing to the municipality's objectives to reduce their overall carbon footprint. So there's positives in both ways. Okay.
Do we need a motion to
Yes.
approve this
Yeah. just
Pre-budget?
to-
Yes. So back to the purchase, I guess if you ordered it now, you'd expect delivery.
Oh, probably near the beginning or mid 2026.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think.
Now, I guess the question would be the merits of, because we have room in our capital surplus for 2025,
do we look at
do
the
we
one in
look
Sudbury?
at just doing a purchase,
The one in Sudbury?
out of budget purchase now rather than a pre-approval for 2026?
Yeah, I could look into that and make sure that our numbers are good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, why don't we provide authorization to go ahead and order, and then if you don't mind bringing back next meeting, the merits between paying out of our 2025 budget means less surplus,
Yep.
but it also means less capital invested in our 2026 budget.
Okay, so so I'll just defer the council meeting for pre-budget approval on the cruiser, just look at ordering it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and then
Perfect.
if we can
Okay.
decide which
Yep.
how best to do it. So I think
Absolutely. Yeah, no
we have a
problem.
good capital surplus
There's-
thanks to grants. It lightens up our 26 budget.
Yep.
Okay.
Would we still entertain the one in Sudbury, or would we just order a new one?
No,
Okay, that's fine.
I told them thanks anyways, but once I
Yep.
saw they just had the new pricing out and I sent it to you all and I thought, no, like, it doesn't make sense, so.
You gotta keep them replaced. They don't get any better.
We have to
Oh,
move
well,
that.
like I said, each one probably has, 8 years on, so we always go with the last one, and the special constable Ford is dying. It's not, like, you get in that thing and everything moves and squeaks, and so so that'll be the next to go in the fleet for sure.
Andrew?
Sorry, do we have to move that?
Is there a motion? You have to-
Well, yeah. Yeah, we'd have to have it one way or the other, so the approval for the board to allow you to go ahead and order.
Okay.
So moved by Andrew, second by Chris, all in favor? Okay. Thank you.
It's fine, spending money like it's not even mine.
There's just one last in-camera item that we want
Yes, we have to add, yeah, I failed to add that coming out of camera, item 9, F, I guess, CDF, which relates to the investigation by the Cornwall Police Service.
Yes, so I mentioned to the board in camera that I've received internal report for me in regards to an incident that occurred on June 7th in town. My complaint to have investigated was whether the force used on a female suspect was reasonable and justified. And I felt that it was a conflict of interest for the chief, myself, to investigate that. And so I reached out to Cornwall Police to be impartial and do the full investigation. They had full access to all our cameras. There was in-car cameras at the business, body cam footage from a OPP female officer that was involved as well, and did a fulsome review of the case. The matter is still before the court, so I'm not going to get any further. I allowed the board to read the full internal report. I reviewed it with the deputy chief. I reviewed it with the use of force instructors that we have, and determined that there was that the officers did not conduct themselves in any wrongdoing, for the force that was used was necessary and justified to prevent being assaulted further. One of the two recommendations that Cornwall Police provided to us was the purchase of spit masks, they call it, or spit hoods, to have a policy in place for those spit hoods, and to review that with the board, of which I have. And I have the spit hoods here. So these are used quite often across the province. And one of the officers had come from another police service that had these hoods. They just are put over the suspect's head, and you can breathe through the hoods, and it just prevents police or anyone in close proximity to being spit on. I know that I've discussed with the board that I've been spit on several occasions. I've had to take hepatitis A, B, C, whatever the vaccines, because of being spit on. Officers do a lot of prevention for that. I've also had an officer who had to take antibiotics from a dirty needle of someone who was HIV positive. So communicable diseases in our community are very realistic. And generally speaking, the people that we deal with are not violent people that we arrest and take into custody. So I support my officers in this incident, and it'll move forward with the matter that's before the courts.
Any questions or comments on the board? Thank you for the update, Chief. Operational report. Deputy.
Could the deputy put on the spit mask one more time for a demonstration?
Do my whole presentation with it on, Mr. Shamir. You like?
I'm gonna.
Okay. Great. Now smile to the camera.
A little bit of levity. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to bring you the September operational report. Somewhat lengthy, but we'll try to get through it because this has been a little more lengthy meeting than normal.
Sorry.
That's okay.
The final one.
We go on you. Final, yeah. Should do it. Excellent. There you are. Yeah. All right. First page. So you see, for the month of September, we registered 639 occurrences in total, and that's down from 688, which we had logged in August 2025. Overall charges and arrests, we had 79 criminal charges laid in September, and that was a result of 21 arrests that were made. Mr. Howard had asked for a breakdown on some of our breach charges for the month, so just to give him a snapshot. So you can see we had a total of 27 breach-related charges. Those are for the offenses that are listed there, such as breach of recog, failed to comply with probation orders, things of that nature. And that's a total of the 79 total charges, which is about 34%. Not sure if that helps answer anything, but
Appreciate that.
yeah, no problem. If that's something you'd like me to do moving forward, I'm happy to do that too. It's very simple. Well,
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to do.
okay, perfect. Yeah. IPV cases, we had 14, which is down from 16. Assaults were at 3, which are down from 5. Family disputes investigated 8, which was down from 12. Our bail violations were at 6, which was down from 9. And break and enters, we had 1, which was down from 6. Drug offenses were at 3, which remained the same as August. Mischief was at 9, which is down from 10, and our harassment calls for service were down from 12. So generally a downward trend in almost all of our our higher profile occurrences. Yes.
So what's the acronym for IPV?
Intimate partner violence.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. Mental health act calls. We had 29 calls from service, which was down from 37, in August. We had 3 apprehensions. Our hospital wait times ranged from 20 minutes to an hour and a half. And our mobile crisis response team nurses attended with us at 9 of those 29 calls. Proactive policing, 18 hours of foot patrol were logged, 36 hours of school visits. Being September, we're starting to see an upward trend in that. Obviously, we're engaging more with our schools now that they're back in session. Community service, we had 43 hours. On to traffic enforcement, 22 collisions registered for September, 9 of those on private property, 10 on the highway, 3 were failed to remain. Of those collisions investigated, 4 charges were issued in relation to them. We had 151 total traffic-related calls for service. Our officers conducted vehicle stops on 103 vehicles. And enforcement was 60 HDA charges pending from those stops. From 29 of those stops, we had 60 charges laid. Criminal charges for related to traffic-related investigations. We had 17 criminal charges laid in total. I listed some of the offenses there, just you got to get a snapshot of what that entails. One was assault with a peace officer with a weapon, flight from police, operation while impaired, operate motor vehicle while impaired by drugs, operate a motor vehicle while prohibited, dangerous operation of a motor vehicle, possession of property obtained by crime, drive a motor vehicle with cannabis readily available, and carrying control of a motor vehicle with liquor readily available. So you can see that there's some fairly significant criminal offenses there resulting from these traffic stops. Some good proactive work there. Our strategic enforcement traffic priority for September was obviously with schools reopening. We paid attention to school safety zones. I'm happy to report that the numerous hours we did spend on that, we had no violations. So I believe that's a combination of people being respectful and knowing that the kids are out and about, and also our proactive monitoring, just our higher visibility in those school zones. The step target for October would be seatbelt offenses. And a top traffic enforcers in August were Constables Robideau, Ben Keogan, and Constable Sly. The report from our criminal investigation branch. Obviously, we're still very much involved in the, we have a lead investigator assigned to the missing person Bertram file. They're assisting the OPP criminal investigations branch in that. We have some fairly significant offenses that our crime unit's looking into, some fairly complex investigations. We have a child luring case. It was a search warrant drafted for phone records. This is a case where the suspect lured a 15-year-old person from the residence to meet up at a location, and then that victim was later assaulted by the suspect. So those are obviously complex and involved, but we are working through that and should have some resolution on that, hopefully to report next month. We're still investigating a robbery from a local convenience store, and that investigation is moving ahead in a good direction. DNA warrant results, it resulted in further charges being issued to a suspect in a sexual assault investigation, which was involved a child under 16 years. There's a substantial fraud case, which is still ongoing. Our detectives are working with Durham Regional Police to move that investigation forward. We had a romance scam investigation where the victim has been defrauded of over $10,000. So that investigation ongoing, trying to identify an actual suspect from the other end, which obviously can be complex too. So we have another sexual assault investigation, and we're collaborating with the Child and Family Services and other support agencies in the area to get to the bottom of that one. Another significant fraud case that our officers have been working on, it actually stems out to Calgary Police Service, so we're collaborating with them as well as they are investigating similar type of offenses with linked suspects. So it can show you that our major crimes aren't just regulated by our kind of our boundaries, but they're, can be cross country if not further. So And Detective Drowski completed a 2-week crisis negotiator course in Kingston, and he will join Sergeant Dan King as our second trained negotiator, as is a requirement under the CSBA. So we're happy to have that in place as well. I think the next one's just a criminal record checks that we like to report on. That's just being done every month. Let's do that. The courses and workshops, some of the courses that we're doing to try and enhance our officers' training. Obviously, I talked about Detective Drowski on the crisis negotiator course. We sent Constable Hart on the criminal investigators training course. Detective MA has gone on the coercive control CACP national workshop course, which was very informative in relation to that. And Sergeant King and Sergeant Walker have both been trained now as the Ontario Sex Offenders Registry Registrar course. So they're able to alleviate Staff Sergeant Wilson from those duties. She's been kind of doing the bulk of that. So now we have those two that can kind of help ease up some of that of making sure those are registered properly. And Constable Simmons is on the facilitating and assessing police in police learning course. Community Services Officer report. Constable Keoghan's been extremely busy, obviously, with school reopening. He's made sure he's attended at numerous schools, and he's engaging with all schools to ensure that their lockdown drills are refreshed and up to date and enhanced where needed and stuff. So all of our officers have been actually involved in that, and I'm happy to report that all the schools are doing really well with those, and we're receiving some positive feedback on that training. Traffic and safety initiatives in school zones. Assisted various groups such as he always does, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Go Girls, Community Living, represents us at situation tables and other things. So there's some photos there just to kind of highlight the school enforcement piece. The next one, the pumper pull, we are happy to engage ourselves in that, and some of our newer members and some of our regular members helped with the pumper pull on the 27th of September, I believe it was a really good event hosted by the Smith Falls Fire Department. We were glad to support that and be part of it. I hear our officers did very well and have bragging rights that I think they won. So. And just finally, I'd like to acknowledge our two newest recruits to the road, Constables Boucher and Townend. They graduated from the Ontario Police College September 18th, both in great standing there, and they were officially sworn in October 3rd in Perth by the Honourable Justice Johnson. And we're happy to have those two officers in our ranks, and I'll be happy to report next month that we have 3 more members currently at Cornwall intake doing the OPC basic training. So happy to get those folks back too and get them working. So, barring any questions, that's a September overview.
Okay, any questions, comments? Great, thanks for the update.
Thank you, Chair.
Our next meeting scheduled for November 18th at 8 a.m., same place. And at that, I'll seek a motion for adjournment. Moved by Chris, seconded by Chris. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.